For anybody who wants an absolute genius level sort of reaction or commentary aid to the third presidential debate here in the Republican sector, as of recently, we've seen this go down. I'm going to be reviewing it with y'all, so keep in mind what Ron DeSantis is going to open with right now.
Speak to Republican voters who are supporting Donald Trump. Why should you and not him be the Republican nominee to face Joe Biden a year from now?
This country is in trouble, and the elites that have put us here, they don't care about you. They don't care that you're having to grapple with higher grocery prices or have higher gas prices. They don't care that your family's less secure because of the open border that's allowed drugs and even terrorists to come into this country. Well, I care. I am not going to sit idly by and let this country continue its downward spiral. We need leadership, and we need it now. I'll take the hits, I'll take the arrows, I'll take the slings, because ultimately it's not about me. It's about you. I will fight for you. I will make sure to lead this country's revival, and I will win for you and your family. Actions speak louder than words. We don't have time for excuses, and it's not something that we're going to be able to have all these distractions. As a veteran, I will get the job done. Now, if you look where we are now, it's a lot different than we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016.
Okay, so thus far, the emotion he's expositing isn't really checking up. Body language-wise, he's not really singing with his body, so to speak. So what they call it in the sector would be something along the lines of, well, I mean, the guy in the realm of body language is just not really reciprocating what he's saying with full tonality of his use of force, right? So he's not moving his chest. He's not doing that. He's, when he's moving, it's not so much a concordance with what he feels. And so it seems completely rehearsed because, of course, it is rehearsed lines from this guy. It's not a surprise. Anyhow, with respect to how he's going to trigger this point onto a pivot towards the answer at the beginning by saying, well, you know what? To the question, it is, well, Donald Trump is what exactly? Let's see.
He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance. He should explain why he didn't have Mexico pay for the border wall. He should explain why he racked up so much debt. He should explain why he didn't drain the swamp. And he said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing. In Florida, I showed how it's done. 1 year ago here, we won a historic victory, including a massive landslide right here in Miami-Dade County. That's how we...
Okay, so if you notice right there, the last 15 seconds was the most you've ever seen him emote, and the most honest I've ever seen him is when he's talking about the election and the midterms and whatever have you. So he's saying that, oh, well, we're tired of losing. And he picks up on a Trump line. Again, this is the difference in charisma. You can literally point out, you're going to be tired of losing. That's something that Trump said offhand at a rally one time like 8 years ago. Yet they're quoting it a decade later. Why? Because that is the level of charisma that we're working with. That's the level of difference where you have a Skinwalker and Ron who is now emoting some sort of emotion. He's actually singing with his body, so to speak, and is moving around, gyrating a little bit, only because he viscerally really resents the fact that he did really well in Florida in the 2022 midterms, and yet all the other Republicans, by and large, failed that same year. But even this year, a couple days ago, if you were to look at the quasi off-year midterm elections that you had in Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, abortion, etc., these sort of things went horrible for Republicans. And he's saying, well, I'm tired of losing. And then he gets really mad. Here's one catch with what he was saying. That one catch is ostensibly having to do in concordance with, he gets uppity. He starts whining. I'm tired of losing. He's bitching. Again, if you're the winner of Florida, speak it with confidence. How is Donald Trump, when he's on the back foot in defeat, but the fact's not on his side, will come up with some bullshit and he'll sound more in conviction, more in command of what he's saying versus Ron DeSantis, who literally has the truth on his side for this case, literal borne out stats that, you know what, you are an electable politician in Florida, at least. But he can't even say it confidently. Instead, he whines at Daddy Trump, because that's the dynamic, right? Trump is big dogging you, Ron. He's not even going to dignify you with his presence. Instead, he'll just shit on you from his obscure website, and that's it. And so you instead just whine, why aren't you here, Trump? You're a pussy. Really? Plus, on top of this, you've had this whole dynamic of, oh, I'm so electable. And yet, if you're going to say that, say, I won. I said it with confidence. Instead, he goes, oh my God,
You have to do it. So I promise you this, as the nominee, next November, I'll get the job done. And as president, I will deliver.
Your time is up. Let me turn to Ambassador Haley.
Okay, what does Nikki Haley say again? She's the second biggest candidate on the stage right now.
I think you look at the fact that we're almost $34 trillion in debt. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of American families can't afford diapers. 1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bills. You have parents who are worried about what's being said or taught to their child in the classroom. There's no transparency. We have anti-Semitism all over our college campuses, and students feel unsafe. You've got an open border where terrorists can come through, and we've got wars happening all over us, and there are dangers around us. Everybody wants to talk about President Trump. Well, I can talk about President Trump. I can tell you that I think he was the right president at the right time. I don't think he's the right president now. I think that he put us $8 trillion in debt, and our kids are never going to forgive us for that. I think the fact...
So the problem with what she just said is that, well, first of all, anything that she just said, there's nothing quotable in it. And so again, when we're talking about Donald Trump, who's basically going to be the carbon copy of what you want to be if you want to win in the Republican Party nowadays, obviously. I mean, she's just not embodying any of these characteristics, which is difficult as a woman, right? But even more specific to her case, when she's talking about how, well, I thought Donald Trump was the right guy then, but not now. I mean, it's somewhat saying, well, then what did he do wrong? Well, he ran up the debt. He did this. Okay, well, what did he say on the campaign trail? And you, as a 50-year-old woman who should know better about like people lying, exaggerating. I mean, Donald Trump is the king of hyperbole, no? And so when he said, "Oh, I'm going to pay off the debt in 8 years," I mean, did you really take him seriously? Are you really taking the piss out on the voter? Do you expect us not to know that you knew that he was full of shit? I mean, it's just, it's somewhat embarrassing. It's rude for her to assume that the audience is that dumb. Hence why she's not really winning the race, huh?
That he used to be right on Ukraine and foreign issues. Now he's getting weak in the knees and trying to be friendly again. I think that we've got to go back to the fact that we can't live in the past. We can't live in other headlines. We've got to start focusing on what's going to make America strong and proud. And that's what I'm focused on doing. Let's make sure we pay down our...
Here's the problem, okay? And this is just really just primitive sort of political acumen and thought. It's basically that, okay, so you're saying that Donald Trump is getting weak in the knees. First of all, nobody would ever characterize Donald Trump in that context. So to just say that, it just flies at the face of just normal speak. Even beyond this, then she reiterates a point about how she's the strong one relative to Trump. Well, just phenotypically, just naked eye-wise, that just cannot be true. But even better than that, obviously, we're taking the esoteric idea of, well, this candidate is more militaristic than the other one. Again, the voter isn't going to think that deep. Plus, so 50-year-old lady that was she subordinated herself as UN ambassador for Trump, serving this guy. Well, I'm stronger than the guy that I've been serving. Not going to be likely, no? So she's over here putting herself in a position that is only rationalized by a subset of people that are really politically in the know. That sort of niche crowd is not going to be very useful past sort of like a fundraiser level. And so from that perspective, you can see how she can have a niche group of people funding her not grassroots, but astroturfing the sort of movement for her to be second or third place in the primary. But you can see why she's not going to beat Trump.
President.
I think there's something deeper going on in the Republican Party here, and I am upset about what happened last night. We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It was a cancer in the Republican establishment. Let's speak the truth. I mean, since Ronna McDaniel took over as chairwoman of the RNC in 2017, we have lost 2018, 2020, 2022, no red wave that never came. We got trounced last night in 2023. And I think that we have to have accountability in our party. For that matter, Ron, if you want to come on stage tonight, you want to look the GOP voters in the eye and tell them you resign, I will yield my time to you. And frankly, look, people there cheering for losing in the Republican Party. Think about who's moderating this debate. This should be Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk. We'd have 10 times the viewership, asking questions that GOP primary voters actually care about and bringing more people into our party.
Okay, so first of all, this sort of opening introduction is mogging the utter hell out of the other two people, right? And again, he's the smallest of the other two candidates. So out of that grouping of three, he's the one that's most open to actually being honest and coming out fires and gun blazing, right? Anyway, with this guy, he's trying to pitch himself as some sort of like MAGA, sort of like niche, fanfic, or this sort of like basically he's trying to be this Neopet for Donald Trump, right? So he's going to be like somebody in the cabinet, ideally not a janitor or something like more appropriate for him, but more so, maybe Department of Defense, something like that. Anyway, so you have that going on. And so he's over here positing that Ronna McDaniel and the establishment as we know it is ostensibly going to be ineffective. And you could say that that is completely true. And what's even better than that, it's great. I had to pause the video and I forgot what I was going to say. Whoops.
You think the Democrats, and we've got Kristen Welker here, do you think the Democrats would actually hire Greg Gutfeld to host a Democratic debate? They wouldn't do it. And so the fact of the matter is, Kristen, I'm going to use this now because this is actually about you in the media and the corrupt media establishment. Ask you, the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed on this network for years, was that real or was that Hillary Clinton made up disinformation? Answer the question. Go.
Mr. Roberts.
He got them good. He got confidence. See, that's real confidence. That's being a real man right there when he says, blah, 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 go. And then his eyes flare up because he's actually channeling it into an actual potential, not for violence, but just to say, you know what? I'm here speaking out of my chest. I am the third or fourth place candidate. I don't give a fuck. I'm going in. I don't care. Optics out the window. Ronna McDaniel named. Chubby bitch. What? Niece for Mitt Romney? You suck. Okay, go on. Go off, King. And then, so again, he goes and he talks to Lester Holt, whoever the fuck there. And he says, you CBS people, NBC, you suck. Your corporate media, you're rigged. Why would the Republican Party agree to this bullshit? Do you think that the Democrat debate would ever subjugate themselves to a Greg Gutfield sort of questioning? No. Would they even entertain a Joe Rogan, who's like supposed to be the centrist? No, not even that. Okay, so then what makes you think that the Republicans are in their right mind going to subjugate themselves to fucking Lester Holt, some fucking knockoff Don Lemon with a receding hairline that looks like you fucking scalped an almond? And so now he's really calling into account everybody who's making these bad decisions in the party. And he's saying it with full vindication, which is why he can actually speak and say, go. Challenge the moderators. Let's see what the fuck they say.
This is how we get our country back.
Cope smirk.
Accountability, because this media rigged the 2016 election. They rigged the 2020 election with the Hunter Biden laptop story. And they're going to rig this election.
Your time is up.
Accountability.
Let me turn to Governor Christie. Why you?
They didn't even address what he said. Now, here's the difference between Vivek Ramaswamy and Trump. Again, he took a lot of his notes from Trump, obviously, and that's not really a bad thing because clearly that's what works. But I mean, it shows the difference in temperament, but also perception. Donald Trump, older billionaire, he goes and he says, answer my question. They would totally answer it because they respect him and they're scared of him. Whereas with Vivek, he's like a shorter brown guy. Okay, well, whatever. Pantomime him. Okay, you're gone. We're not going to answer your question as a moderator, even though it's a valid question for him to ask. And so that's just the dynamic.
So look, you said it at the beginning of the debate. We are dealing with extraordinarily important issues facing this country right now. We have our greatest ally in the Middle East under fire from a terrorist group that has committed to wiping them and every Jewish person in this world off the map. We have Ukraine with Vladimir Putin, a communist KGB dictator who wants to put the old band back together. He's starting in Ukraine and he's going to move to the Baltics and Poland after that.
So fear mongering. Okay. That only works if your alternative is confide in me, right? So paternal figure. Okay. Ronald Reagan, 70-year-old good-looking older guy could be like, well, folks, there's an iron curtain in this. And then you'd be like, oh, well, save me. Clint Eastwood in the flesh, save me. No, this is some fat fucking hog being like, oh, Putin and the KGB, bro, who cares? Nigga, what year is it? You're talking about Putin's job description from like 20 years before me being even born, man. Jesus Christ.
We have inflation in this country that is choking every American family that wants to try to rise up. And
again, choking isn't really good verbiage when you literally look like you're choking, man.
Give their children a better life. And tonight, we need to decide which president is going to be the one to tackle the big issues, who's going to make this country look once again, not just inward, but look outward at the world and say America is the country, the indispensable nation that makes this a safer world. And in a safer world, American innovation, American hard work has always been the thing that has driven our country to greater things. I'm going to be the president who will do those big things. We're not going to be small, and I'll say this about Donald Trump. Anybody who's going to be spending the next year and a half of their life focusing on keeping themselves out of jail and courtrooms cannot lead this party or this country, and it needs to be said plainly.
Governor, thank you. Let me turn to Senator Scott. Senator Scott, you've said former President Trump can't win. Make your case to Republican voters.
Well, certainly. What I would say without any question is that the truth of my life destroys the lies of the radical left. We need a president and a candidate who will actually help our base solidify and attract independent voters into our party. The Great Opportunity Party is now winning back African-American voters and Hispanic voters because we are working on a foundation based on faith. Our nation is facing some deep challenges. It is the loss of faith in this nation that is a part of the erosion that we're seeing every single day. It's restoring faith, restoring our Christian values that will help this nation once again become the city on the hill. When Ronald Reagan talked about the city on the hill.
Again, more Reagan cope. Again, so it's just so boring. Like, what is he bringing to the table exactly? And why is he not waiting tables at an IHOP? What makes him so special? And tell me he doesn't look like the Buckeyes mascot, the gas station fucking squirrel or beaver. I don't know what that is.
Inside Gaza City with over 200 hostages who remain captive there and civilian casualties mount inside Gaza. As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be telling Bibi.
Keep in mind, again, Israel is a country that is like the size of New Jersey, okay? So we're talking about a place that is infinitesimally small, a place that has a much smaller economy than ours, a state that without us would be virtually dead within a year, okay? So in that context, how would you speak to the prime minister of a state in which he just barely won the election, where he's hardly keeping any coalition alive politically, a guy who's politically at life or death situations in every election. Somebody in yet Netanyahu who's been around for 20 years, and yet, how does that relationship play out with the other presidents? This sort of foreground plays a huge role into whatever their answer is. So again, keep in mind, we're the bigger country. So how do they respond? Again, if you're Donald Trump, who is a guy who's like very pro-Israel, he'd still talk busting the balls with the other guy, not because he's like anti-Jew, but just because it's the dynamic, right? Bigger country, smaller subsisting state or whatever. Okay, bust their balls. What is Ron gonna do?
Finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas. They're terrorists. They're massacring innocent people. They would wipe every Jew off the globe if they could. He cannot live with that threat right by his country. That Hamas should release every hostage and they should unconditionally surrender. I'm sick of hearing the media. I'm sick of hearing other people blame Israel just for defending itself. We will stand with Israel in word and in deed, in public and in private. And I can tell you, as governor, I actually did something about it. Biden's neglect has been atrocious. We had Floridians that were over there after the attack. He left them stranded. They couldn't get flights out. So I scrambled resources in Florida. I sent planes over to Israel, and I brought back over 700 people to safety. There could have been more hostages had we not acted. And I'll tell you this, I met the first plane load when they came to Florida, and one of the mothers pointed to a 6-year-old daughter, and she said, my daughter had been saying the last 2 nights, Mommy, I don't want to hear any more bombs, no more rockets. I just want to get back to Florida. So there's a difference between words and deeds. We acted, and we saved lives.
Thank you. Ambassador Haley.
That was an okay response. It's just that, again, you have to view it from the prism of, like, how would Donald Trump answer this? Just like, Ron, can you watch The Godfather? Get an idea as to how a patriarch acts, right? He just answers like a fucking, like it's like a school report, man. It pisses me off.
Mr. Ramaswamy. Mr. Ramaswamy.
So basically, the whole Nikki Haley response to that question was virtually what you would expect. Like, what? The UN wanted to destroy Hamas, Israel, whatever. Okay, let's go to Vivek, who has a little bit of a contrarian position.
On this issue, on what you would tell the Prime Minister?
Not just what I would tell the Prime Minister, no. In fact, I would go one step further. The founding vision of Israel was based on the idea that they don't want to depend on anybody else's sympathy or direction in defending themselves. So what I would tell Bibi is that Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself. I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border, and then I'll tell him as President of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border. That's his responsibility. This is our responsibility. That's how we move forward. But I want to be careful.
You see how he couches it? So he couches it in saying, so again, in his heart of hearts, he doesn't really support Israel, not to the degree that everybody else is, right? So he has a more fiscally libertarian inclination at the very least, if not just more of an apathy to Israel. And so he has a more center position where he says, well, okay, well, you Israelis, you have the complete right to do whatever you want there, but also the responsibility, which is to say, okay, well, son, you want to date this whore? Okay, well, go ahead, but go fuck off. I'm not going to support you. Okay, that's basically what he's saying. But in layman terms, he's also doing it in a way to where he just says that whole spiel that I just gave, but with the term responsibility is how he implies it. And so he's not going to get lambasted in the media as hard as otherwise because he couches it in such a careful way. But the way that he says it also makes it so that when the crowd hears it, they don't viscerally respond, so he doesn't get a clap. So it's somewhat of a trade-off.
To avoid making the mistakes from the neocon establishment of the past. Corrupt politicians in both parties spent trillions, killed millions, made billions for themselves in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting wars that sent thousands of our sons and daughters, people my age, to die in wars that did not advance anyone's interests, adding $7 trillion to our national debt. And Joe Biden sold off our foreign policy. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, got a $5 million bribe from Ukraine. That's why we're sending $200 billion back to that same country. The fact of the matter is the Republican Party is not that much better. You have the likes of Nikki Haley, who stepped down from her time at the UN. Bankrupt or in debt was her family. Then she becomes a military contractor. She joins the board of Boeing and otherwise, and is now a multimillionaire. So I think that that's wrong when Republicans do it or Democrats do it. That's the choice we face. Do you want a leader from a different generation?
Mind you, the way that Nikki Haley reacted to that accusation, if somebody were to make that up about my family or something along the lines of that, I would be like, what the hell are you talking about? I'd be like, what the fuck? But she didn't do that. She just kind of was like, because she knew that was true, that she retired from politics mid-Trump administration before she would have gotten fired, I suppose. And ostensibly, while the going was good, she does that. Okay, fine. She quits the UN. All right. And then what happens? Okay, so she's broken even or she's in debt, as referenced by Ramaswamy. And then what does she do? She joins the board of Boeing, which again is like, titular, neocon, military industrial complex, that whole kebab. Okay, well, if that's the case, then, it was true. It's a true accusation. So she's somewhat of a sellout, assuming she's not in her heart of hearts a neocon, which, you know what, for anything that it's worth, she probably is.
Going to put this country first, or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
All right, Mr.
In which case we got 2 of them on stage.
Mr. Ramaswamy, thank you. Senator Scott, yes.
He just killed Ron DeSantis as well. So he says, what do you guys want? A Dick Cheney and 3-inch heels? So Dick Cheney was the vice president for George Bush like 20 years ago, and he was the biggest war proponent ever. Who everybody, even including Republicans, hate Dick Cheney nowadays. And so anyway, he's saying, okay, well, this chick is 3-inch heels, Dick Cheney, right? Okay, and then also he says you got 2 of these warmongers in 3-inch heels, and it's him, Ron DeSantis, and Nikki Haley. And then Ron kind of smirks like, oh shit, and he got it before he could actually respond, though. So he got cut off by Lester.
Senator, same question to you about, you're the president, you're on the phone in the Oval Office with the Prime Minister.
See how everybody's laughing in the back?
Well, number one, I would tell Prime Minister Netanyahu, not only do you have the responsibility and the right to wipe Hamas off of the map, we will support you. We will be there with you. We'll stand shoulder to shoulder. There will be no daylight. But I would change the station a little bit, though, and head back home to America. I would say to President Biden, diplomacy only is a weak strategy. Appeasement leads to war. From President Obama to President Biden, Obama sent millions to Iran. Frankly, President Biden has sent billions to Iran. That is why I've said that there's blood dripping from the hands of President Obama and President Biden. I would tell President Biden with great clarity, if you want to stop the 40-plus attacks on military personnel in the Middle East, you have to strike in Iran. If you want to make a difference.
This just is not working. I don't even need to cover Tim Scott. He just fucking sucks.
Governor Haley, would you please answer that?
Yes, I'd first like to say they're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
So first of all, that's a retort to your Dick Cheney and 3-inch heels. Actually, they're 5-inch heels. Bitch, shut the fuck up. Plus, on top of this, she does the... Okay, let's replay that. Watch her fucking face movement. Watch this. Pay close
yes, I'd
attention.
first like to say they're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
You see that?
The second thing that I will say is I wear heels. They're not for a fashion statement. They're for ammunition. What we need to be doing for Iraq...
What? I don't wear heels as a fashion statement. I wear them for ammunition. Have you guys ever heard of that saying? Is this like a girl thing? Is that a Sex in the City reference? Huh? What in the 50-year-old wine mom did I just fucking hear? Jesus.
In Syria is, first of all, the idea that our men and women could be targeted and that we've allowed almost 100 hits to happen under Biden's watch is unthinkable. We need to understand this is Iran giving the green light, telling them what to do, and we shouldn't be doing the tit for tat like what Joe Biden has done. We need to go and take out their infrastructure that they are using to make those strikes with so they can never do it again. Iran responds to strength. You punch them one and you punch them hard and they will back off. But what we don't need...
She's literally saying bomb Iran's infrastructure. Folks, are you fucking kidding me? Again, so this is your Trump alternative, by the way. Dick Cheney in heels is literally an understatement. Dick Cheney wanted war in Iran, but he never actually goaded George Bush into bombing Iran proper in 2006. But like, what? She says punch Iran. Punch Iran literally means bomb the fucking country. No extra war, by the way. Okay, great. Thanks, lady.
Is Biden falling all over himself to get back in the Iran deal? Him giving $6 billion to get 5 hostages home? Him telling Netanyahu now that he needs a pause or a ceasefire? We don't need him going and sitting there tiptoeing around Iran because he thinks they're going to do something. You don't respond to an enemy and a terrorist with fear. You respond with strength. When you do that, that's when the world pays attention, and that's when Iran stops.
Thank you. Governor DeSantis, if I can continue with you. Just today, the U.S. launched another one of its limited airstrikes against targets in Syria, this time Iranian-linked facility. How far would you go militarily to hold Iran accountable?
Well, first, Matt, thanks for your question, and I appreciate what you've done over the last month. I know it's been very difficult for the community, and appreciate you guys rallying together in difficult times. I actually
see. So there was the head of the Republican Jewish whatever, and he asked a question, and then he thanks them. Like, dude, who gives a fuck?
Served in Iraq back in the day, and we had Al-Qaeda in Iraq. You had Shia militias that were funded by Iran that were killing hundreds and hundreds of U.S. troops. And as commander-in-chief, I am not going to put our troops in harm's way unless you're willing to defend them with everything you have. Biden has them out there. They're sitting ducks. He's doing glancing blows. That's just inviting more attacks.
So they're criticizing Joe Biden not for not supporting Israel or anything. He's just saying they're not doing it enough. So it's like glazed competition. Who's going to put more troops in jeopardy? And it's somewhat of an unpalatable thing to do as a candidate, and they're going full throat for it. Not surprised.
It's sad to see, but here's what history teaches us. Anti-Semitism is a symptom of a deeper cancer in a country and a society that is lost, and we are lost. Several years ago when I wrote my first book, Woke Inc., I was talking about they were chanting death to America, death to white people, death to Christians. Nobody was waking up back then. Now it's even bad. Now they're saying death to Israel and worse. So it is wrong, but we have to get to the root cause here. Now, I think it's really important that we do this through leadership, not censorship. Leadership means fill that void with purpose and meaning. Dilute this wokeism and anti-Semitism to irrelevance. These kids, they have no idea what the heck they're even talking about. When they're siding with Hamas over Israel, they're fools. But I also want to call...
So you see how he's confident in the way that he talks. Now his disposition, or I guess the way he comes off, is a little bit geek, sort of like IT, like, wow, the guy from Best Buy is actually smart, is the sort of vibe you get. And that's a little bit too bad. And I have a similar problem when, I talk pretty fast. And so I could slow the cadence down and things like this. But in general terms, you can understand what I'm getting at, to where he speaks in a fast tone, but it's confident and it actually communicates something that is profound. And what's profound about the way that he gesticulates is that he puts the pointer finger, he accuses, but he accuses in a subliminal sense, but in a way that is actually proficient. Ron DeSantis cannot pull this off.
Caution here, if we go the direction of Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley, with whom I respectfully disagree on this issue, pro-censorship, telling student groups to disband, mark my words, soon they will say if you question a vaccine and its side effects, you're a bioterrorist. Soon they will say that if you show up at a school board meeting, you're a domestic terrorist. Soon if they say that J6 prisoners should be released, you're an insurrectionist terrorist. So that's where this road ends. We don't quash this with censorship because that creates a worse underbelly. We quell it through leadership by calling it out. These university administrators have lost their way, and we need leadership at the top in the United States of America that restores our founding values and that has no place for this kind of anti-Semitic hate. That's where I stand while respecting our Constitution.
Your time is out. Senator Scott, let me get you to weigh in on what you just heard.
So let me just say to every single university.
Skip alert.
Second.
Huge red flag alert. Okay, look how he emotes, and it's fake. He's not actually being sincere about this, but just pay
I
attention.
have friends here in Florida who their kids do not feel safe even going to university campus at all outside of the state of Florida. You have Jewish students fleeing for their lives at Cooper Union. Joe Biden.
Okay, look, I don't know about Florida, but, in Arizona, that is the biggest crock of shit ever. And there are some students that are afraid of, like, oh, the Palestinians, but, like, are you fucking kidding me? The Jews are running for their lives. Yeah, sure, okay. Maybe it's just, instead of senior skip day, it's fucking Jewish skip the semester? Why? Because there's a fucking war going on? So what? So, I mean, this whole, like, oh, these people are fearing for their lives, I mean, I think he's full of shit, but, we don't know.
Biden should have the Department of Justice on these college campuses and holding the universities accountable for civil rights violations. When you should not have money going to these places. I already acted in Florida. We had a group.
So Ron DeSantis is one of these people that thinks that, there's like grooming going on in schools, that whites are being discriminated against, that there's civil rights violations against conservatives. But as soon as it is like Jewish foreign nationals and people of Jewish heritage that are like vaguely being under threat of like Hamas fan groups on like campus, then all of a sudden we need the FBI involved. But like, okay, so you see how bought the interests there are, how rigged the game is when somebody like Ron DeSantis actually has to pretend to give a shit about something for once.
Students for Justice of Palestine, they said they are common cause with Hamas. They said, we're not just in solidarity, this is what we are. We deactivated them. We're not going to use state tax dollars to fund jihad. No way. And what is Biden doing? Not only is he not helping the Jewish students who are being persecuted, he is launching an initiative to combat so-called Islamophobia. No, it's the anti-Semitism that's spiraling out of control. Right. That is what we have to confront. And as president, I can tell you this.
Do you notice how much he cares about this issue compared to things that are actually important? When he talks about the fentanyl crisis or anything like that later on, you'll notice that he doesn't actually emote as much as this. When in reality, from what I can tell, no Palestinian has killed a Jew like on campus thus far. Damn well the media would cover that, of course. And so it's like to that point, okay, well, how do you care that much about a thing where nobody died thus far versus, again, the fentanyl thing, which is a very omnipresent thing in politics. And so it points to the fact that he is kind of into this bot interest.
President Zelensky's urgent new plea. Where do you stand on more funding?
I'm absolutely unpersuaded. And I'm actually enjoying watching the Ukraine hawks quietly, delicately tiptoe back from their position as this thing has unwound into a disaster. The first half of this race, I was the only person standing for it. Now they're actually quietly coming around to being more cautious, as they should. Level with the American people here. Ukraine is not a paragon of democracy. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties. It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm. That's not democratic. It has threatened not to hold elections this year unless the U.S. forks over more money. That is not democratic. It has celebrated a Nazi in its ranks, the comedian in cargo pants, a man called Zelensky, doing it in their own ranks. That is not democratic. More facts for you that you won't hear from the mainstream in either party or
so again, his delivery is really quick and it's very efficient, but the problem is that when he has a clever line such as, okay, well, the Nazi in cargo pants, Zelensky, that could be something that's funny. And if somebody like Trump were to mention it, it'd be funny because the way that he actually enunciates words comes with a sort of weight to the way that he phrases the sentence to such an extent to where you could actually laugh. Whereas with Ramaswamy, he'll just say it in the same pace as he says everything else. And so his comedic timing doesn't exist. And so that's an important facet. Somebody else who brought in comedy into politics was Ronald Reagan. He had actually written jokes and he actually performed them well because, again, he had the stage presence and the Hollywood career to kind of back it up.
that are occupied by Russia right now in the Donbass, Luhansk, Donetsk. These are Russian-speaking regions that have not even been part of Ukraine since 2014, that other people probably couldn't name those provinces for you. Those are the hard facts. And so to frame this as some kind of battle between good versus evil, don't buy it. And I'd like the likes of the sharpest of the war hawks on Ukraine, Nikki Haley, to have some accountability and answer. Do you want to use U.S. taxpayer money to fund the banning of Christians? That is actually what's happening. They're using the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They have banned them. The Ukrainian parliament just did this last week, supported by our dollars. And I think you owe it to the American people, Nikki, to at least this one
Mr.
time
Ramaswamy,
condemn.
thank you. That's time.
At least
Mr.
condemn
Ramaswamy,
their
thank
banning
you.
of Christians.
Mr. Ramaswamy, thank you. Mr. Ramaswamy, thank you. We asked the questions. Ambassador Haley, what is your take on more funding for Ukraine?
I am telling you, Putin and President Xi
Again,
are
another
salivating
problem
at
with
the thought that someone
Ramaswamy.
like that
So
could become
he
president. They
is
would love
a competent person and whatnot. But then what happens here is that she gets questioned directly. Like, he literally turns his body to face her, makes eye contact, presumably. And, you know, this brown bitch, I don't remember what her name is, Christian something. She doesn't even like respond. She doesn't even acknowledge that there was a question. She just rewords the same old, contrite bullshit. And it's like, well, are we having a debate, or are we having some sort of open-ended interview between five people that are stood across from each other? I don't know. It's fucking inappropriate.
So this is what I will tell you. First of all,
Mr. Ramaswamy, you had your time to talk. The ambassador has the floor.
Thank
Ambassador,
you. The
please.
first thing I'll tell you is we all remember what that thug did when he invaded Ukraine. We all know that 500,000 people have died because of Putin. And here is a freedom-loving, pro-American country that is fighting for its survival and its democracy. No, I don't think we should give them cash. I think we should give them the equipment and the ammunition to win. And I'll tell you, if Biden had done it when they first asked for it, this war would be over. But let's also remember this. When you left Afghanistan in shambles and left them with a ton of weapons and money, it's not that we left, it's how we left. When you look at Ukraine, don't think for a second, now everybody wants to move away from Ukraine. They'll want to move away from Israel a year from now. America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends. After
Bruh. So we need friends. So we need, okay, wait, hold on. Don't be so arrogant to think that we don't need friends. And what does that include? Okay, so to have friendship, you need to bail them out of literally everything. Give Ukraine $500 billion over the course of like 5 years, and then what? And then Israel $15 billion right now, and God knows how much later on. I mean, it's just a fucking ridiculous proposition. I mean, any sort of good politician would kill her on this right now.
9/11, we needed a lot of friends. Now is the time to get partnerships. This unholy alliance between Russia, Ukraine, and China is real. There is a reason the Taiwanese want us to support the Ukrainians. It's because they know that China is coming after them next. There is a reason Ukrainians want us to support Israelis, because they know that if Iran wins, Russia wins.
Ambassador,
we have to see the combination of the three.
Ambassador, thank you. Governor Christie, what is your take? And how long should Americans be expected to help fund the war in Ukraine?
Kristen, let's remember the last time that we turned our back on a shooting war in
Kristen is
Europe.
her name.
It bought us just a couple of years. And then 500,000 Americans were killed in Europe to defeat Hitler. This is not a choice. This is the price we pay for being the leaders of the free world.
What the fuck does that even mean?
And the fact is, this alliance is not just with Russia and China. Governor Haley knows this. Iran is in the middle of this as well, and so is North Korea. And they are all working to support Russia right now. And the reason they're doing it is because dictators work together. People who believe in democracy work together. We must stand with all of those that are standing up for democracy and freedom in this world. And by the way, let's remind everybody of this. In 1992, this country made a promise to Ukraine. We said, if you return nuclear missiles that were part of the old Soviet Union to Russia, and they invade you, we will protect you. An American promise that's 31 years old is no different than an American promise that's made tonight on this stage. We need to stand by it. And those of us who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And
I'd like to respond.
Which is why, if you've been fat for like 50 years, you'd know that the history is that if you eat a donut, you're going to gain weight, and yet you don't fucking learn your own lesson there. I mean, it's just so infuriating listening to this guy fucking speak. He's just one shade better charismatically than Tim Scott. I mean, it's just fucking pathetic.
Specifically about the Navy. It's at 291. It's going to go down perhaps as low as 280. Is it enough? And what would you build if you were going to build more?
Not enough. We have to have the ability to back up a strategy of denial of President Xi's ambitions. And
is that really human speak? Again, you're talking to the median voter, some 50-year-old fucking obese white guy in Arkansas, and you're saying, we need a denial of authority. Bro, what the fuck are you talking about? Let's speak in real human terms. He cannot even fathom that. Another point. He says, the Navy isn't big enough. Just imagine what Trump would say. Let me do it for you. Is the Navy at 291 ships and going down? Is that enough of a Navy to deter China? Listen, I'm going to build the greatest ships. I remember when I was a kid, we had the biggest, hugest carriers, big, beautiful planes. We're going to bomb the shit out of them. Again, painting a picture. You as a layman in Arkansas can actually understand what the fuck the guy, ironically enough, the billionaire with the gilded gold toilet, that guy actually can relate to people viscerally, because he could just in third grader terms, like using the verbiage of an 8-year-old boy can explain actually why the Navy's important. But instead, what Ron DeSantis does he'll speak in this nerd term, and it just doesn't work.
If China is able to be the world's leading superpower, that will affect you and your family in ways that are going to be very bad. They will export authoritarianism all around the world as the cost of doing business. They will impose things like social credit scores and internet monitoring. So this is, to this generation, what the Soviet Union was to the post-World War II generation.
That is so profoundly gay when you think about it, right? Like, just the most oddball sort of queer thing. Like, okay, so you compare the Soviet Union, which was like a whole nuclear problem, but instead the facet that you compare China to, it isn't like you cite, okay, so social credit score, they export authoritarianism, which is like, how the fuck do they even do that? Export authoritarianism to where? Tibet, North Korea? I mean, do we really care? I mean, if they're so good at exporting authoritarianism, then how come Japan is this like liberal democracy, or South Korea, or fucking Taiwan, for fuck's sake? I mean, seriously, they can't even conquer a place that's like half the size of Arizona, if that.
The plan, we're going to get to 355 ships at the end of the first term, 385 ships at the end of the second term, but we're going to have a path to 600 ships over the next 20 years. I think the future of freedom is going to be determined in the Indo-Pacific. We have a strategy not just military, but decoupling from the economy and fighting them here at home with their cultural. Ambassador Haley said somehow I wasn't doing. She welcomed them into South Carolina, gave them land near a military base, wrote the Chinese ambassador a love letter saying what a great friend they were. That was like their number one way to do economic development. In Florida, I banned China from buying land in this state, and we kicked out on our universities, and we kicked the Confucius Institutes out of our universities. We've recognized the threat, and we've acted swiftly and decisively.
Senator Scott, you've been in the Congress since 2011. Defense spending has fallen over that entire period of time.
Oh,
Where
no,
are we
Tim
going
Scott
to get
L.
the money?
On China for the supply chain, for the F-35 jets, for the ships that we're building. Think about this. Why are we stockpiling that if it isn't to actually be strong against our enemy, China? We depend on them for that, just like we depend on them for pharmaceuticals, just like we depend on them for semiconductors. So here's why we can't get tough with China. It's because we depend on them for our modern way of life, and we have to declare economic independence from our enemy. That's the Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson, at the age of 33, would have signed. And today, if he were alive, that's the Declaration of Independence that I will sign as the next president. I do have to recognize that Ron DeSantis was correct about acknowledging Nikki Haley's tough talk when she was ambassador to the UN, calling China our great friend, bringing the CCP to South Carolina. What he left out, though, Ron, and be honest about it, there was a lobbying-based exemption in that bill that allowed Chinese nationals to buy land within a 20-mile radius of a military base lobbied for by one of your donors. So I think we have to call a spade a spade. We need politicians who are independent of the forces that increase our dependence on China. My message to Xi Jinping is this. You are done buying land in this country. You will not donate to universities in this country. U.S. businesses won't expand into the Chinese market until you play by the same set of rules.
Ramaswamy,
You're kicked out of the
quick
WTO,
follow-up.
and you actually have to have accountability for the COVID-19 pandemic financially, which unleashed hell on the world. We have to hold them accountable.
Okay, again, great. You literally filled out all the things, all the check marks in the rubric. Okay, I'm going to pass you, Vivek. But in this class, we want actual fucking pizzazz. And that sounds kind of gay. But it's true. It's true, girl. Listen, you really need to understand that in order to be an effective politician, people ought to hang to every fucking sentence you utter. And what that means is that when you say something, it ought to have weight. Instead, he'll just articulate something in a way that is actually, it corresponds to the truth, obviously, and he gets all the points done. But I mean, he's not doing it with any sort of flair or anything that makes it memorable. I mean, what line from what Vivek is saying is quotable? He doesn't have any bars, is what I'm saying. He doesn't have any sort of switch of flow or anything even approximating such. And so Donald Trump could get the same sort of verbiage that Vivek is saying, but he'd make it a lot more entertaining. And that sort of difference is what makes the essential differential between him and an actual good politician. And so Vivek, when he accuses Ron of something that is completely legit, Ron could just dismiss it and say, not true. And that's it. And, if anything, he should have just accused Ron of that sort of exemption as a technicality or whatever hairline fracture in one of his logical loops that he was getting in. If he were to just say that and then just shut the fuck up, that would actually have more of an impact than go on a spiel continually for another 20 seconds talking about, how he's going to impose COVID reparations or something silly.
A number and a plan.
I think that we need to increase our naval capacity by at least 20% over the course of the next several years. I think we have to, at minimum, be able to meet our AUKUS agreement standards. Right now, we are at risk of not even being able to meet our AUKUS standards with Australia and the UK. So what we need to do is
So that's somewhat of an obscure political reference to a naval treaty done with obviously those English-speaking countries. But I mean, this sort of level of specificity isn't really doing anything for the common voter. Again, think of somebody who's dumber than me. That's your average voter. And so these people aren't in the know about the Kanzuk agreements or whatever AUKUS agreement. They just don't know. So to cite these is just not really working. And you could, from his point of view, you could be like, well, I'm trying to look savvy in foreign policy, so I'll reference this obscure thing. But that's not exactly what you need, right? So if you're trying to say, well, I'm a football coach, the best approach wouldn't it be like, well, you need to do a swing duo, single back formation, pistol formation? No. You don't bring up this obscure bullshit, right? Instead, what you do is you bring up points that are cogent to the conversation that prove that these sort of nuances actually elaborate as to how competent of a person you are at espousing whatever you're referring to. Whereas with Vivek, you're talking about somebody who's verbose, but also bringing up shit that's obscure, but isn't actually cool. And so he's just kind of falling on deaf ears.
Have a plan that reverses the trajectory of the divest to invest program
I'd like to
by 20% over the next 3 years.
Governor Christie?
My first observation, Hugh, is that nobody answers your question. And my second observation is these three in the middle think they're the enemy. I know China is the enemy, and that's what we should focus on. So let's be really clear. The nuclear submarines in this United States Navy is the greatest deterrent to Chinese aggression, and that is the first place I would go to increase American naval power. Our nuclear submarines are able to move stealthily, quietly, and effectively, and if we are going to deter China from invading Taiwan, the only way we're going to do it is to make sure that they don't know whether how many nuclear submarines from the United States of America are in the South China Sea and in that area and ready to strike on them if they decide to move on Taiwan. And so we, as our first priority, need to go directly to our nuclear sub program, Hugh, and we need to increase it drastically. That would be priority number one. Ships would come next, but to me, the ships are secondary choice here. The submarines are the single most important thing.
See, that's actually the best thing he said this whole debate, and because he'll give a detail that is actually cogent to what he's referring to, but also not too verbose and not too specific to actually ward off the attention of anybody who's just kind of like viscerally, not giving a shit, right? And so he'll say, well, nuclear submarines. Well, nuclear submarines sounds like a very dangerous thing. And so people that don't know anything about them, I know a lot about that, but most people don't. Now, the name in and of itself would say like, okay, well, yeah, this fat ass, he's cooking something and he's liking it, he's eating it. He's saying, well, you know what? These submarines are dangerous because they have nukes. Okay, that sounds like a good idea. And then it actually paints a picture in the mind of the average voter to such a point where it actually makes a ton of sense.
Thing that we could be deterring, that we could be using to deter China. But the other thing we could do to deter China is to let them know that the blood money they're spending for Russia in Ukraine right now will not be effective. That we send Putin home with his tail between his legs and make them understand that the same fate waits for them if they decide to move towards Taiwan with a more aggressive nuclear sub-program. We'll be able to make that threat real.
Thank you, Governor. We're going to take a brief pause now and we'll be back.
That just wasn't intimidating coming from him, but I guess that's just more of like a optics sort of thing and not so much any problem with what he said.
Bipartisan Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party published a long essay on TikTok following the flooding of pro-Hamas propaganda onto TikTok.
Okay, I'm not going to do the
Chairman
TikTok.
Gallagher, use it.
Well, I want to laugh at why Nikki Haley didn't answer your question, which is about looking at families in the eye. In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my
before
daughter
preaching
out of
to
your
your
voice.
adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it. And that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy
scum.
answer is actually to say that we're just going to...
She is such a high school girl. First, she does the at some other point, like an hour ago. And then she does this thing where she's like, you're such scum. Bro, you're 50 years old. Why does that come out of your mouth? First. Second, again, so Vivek does something that is actually rhetorically effective, but not in the best way. So I guess, A for credit or for participation. Here's your trophy, son. Anyway, so he brings up the fact that he got castigated because he did a he was soliciting campaign funds or something, and he collaborated with Jake Paul on TikTok, which is an odd pairing. But okay, I could see why he would, as somebody who's anti-TikTok and pushing 40, would do that because of the clout and the opportunity. Okay, fine. Now, she called him out like, oh, you're anti-TikTok, but you did a TikTok for this. Okay, fine. But then, speaking of families, which is related, Vivek says, okay, well, you have a daughter that's on TikTok. If you're so anti-TikTok, why is your kid on it? And that's important, obviously. Now, the way that Nikki responded gives you the impression like, dude, are you talking about like her 8-year-old daughter on TikTok? Isn't that kind of weird? Well, no, I think the daughter's Nikki Haley, who's like this chick that graduated from Clemson. So she's like 3 years older than me. So, I mean, it's fair game at that point, but she pretends to be pissed off for no fucking reason.
Ban one app. We got to go further. We have to ban any U.S. company actually transferring U.S. data to the Chinese. Here's a story most people don't know. Airbnb hands over U.S. user data to the CCP. Now, that's a U.S.-owned company. So this is the problem when you have Republicans that temporarily go the way the winds blow, and now it's popular to talk tough on China when she was UN ambassador, called them literally her words, not mine, our great friend. You can't be fair weather fans of the right policy. Get to the root cause. Even U.S. companies in Silicon Valley are regularly doing it. Cut the virtue signaling. The fact of the matter is Democrats are on TikTok today. The only person, one of the few people who is putting up content the way the actual algorithms work, speaking for pro-Israel views or others, is
Ambassador
me.
Haley,
more Republicans will join it. But stop U.S. companies from turning over data to Chinese companies. That's the real
Moderators
answer.
like Kristen don't get to respond to personal.
Again, another case where Vivek answers the question completely spot on, but he just keeps going. You don't need to do it, okay? It's kind of like, You know, when you have a cheeseburger and the fucking cheese is just getting everywhere, it's like, okay, well, you overdid everything, okay? So just slow it the fuck down.
But you do.
Thank you very much. You know, when he talks about me praising China, he doesn't know the fact that the reason China was praised was because I negotiated with China and Russia the largest set of sanctions against North Korea in a generation. That is literally the reason North Korea stopped testing ballistic missiles. So I said China did good on their part. That was a negotiation you could never do.
What you said, Nikki. Those are your words, not mine. And so just own up to it.
You would never
can
been
change
able to
your mind.
get that negotiation
But don't
done.
lie to the people about what you've said or what you've done in South Carolina.
My
You have brought
entire
them to South
career at
Carolina.
the
Ron was
United
right about
Nations.
that.
Every day I fought China, and I did it
Look at the
by making
actual
sure
hard
no
facts.
one
You
could
brought them
get
to this
any
country.
agency heads in UN. I did it by making sure that we called them out on human rights. I did it by making sure that we held them accountable on everything that they did. That's the reason we got out of Human Rights Council. That's the reason we called them out. And there's not been a day I haven't stopped.
Senator Scott, it is your turn. Mr. Ramaswamy.
Made afterwards.
Everybody else is hanging on to the rules here, Mr. Ramaswamy. Senator Scott.
Thank you. We should. I appreciate y'all clapping for me already.
So that's the crappy part, right? So evidently you have a situation in which you possess a very intriguing argument going on. And of course the fucking moderators stop the fun, like the useless pieces of shit they are. But I mean, overall, what you glean from this interaction is that Nikki Haley got pressed and she just completely spurgs out. And so it's a Vivek W, but I mean, it's true.
To the border. I'm going to stop the invasion cold. I am going to deport people who came illegally. And I'm even going to build the border wall and have Mexico pay for it like Donald Trump promised. How are you going to do it? Yeah, Mexico's not going to fork over money. We're going to impose fees on the remittances that foreign workers send to foreign countries. We'll raise billions of dollars. I'll build a wall. But we are going to designate the cartels to be foreign terrorist organizations or something similar to that. And we're going to authorize the use of deadly force. We're going to have maritime operations to interdict precursor chemicals going into Mexico. But I'll tell you this, if someone in the drug cartel...
It's just a horrible look. The way he explains how he's going to fix the cartel problem. First of all, he rips the Trump slogan of I'm going to make Mexico pay for it. Again, just shows the brass of politician comparatively, of course, between DeSantis and Trump. Trump has all these quotables and bangers of shit he just made up on the spot from 8 years ago. DeSantis has not a single thing. Even better, of course, we have Ron quoting that. And then the other thing we've got going on is that he is citing that he's going to tax remittances, which basically, when a Mexican works illegally and he goes to the Western Union, he goes to the Walmart and he sends like $600 he made that week to his abuelita in Mexico, they want to tax that by like 20% and put like a $50 fee on that transaction so that they could use that to pay the wall. So instead of taxing the Mexicans, he's going to be taxing the Mexicans working here, whereas they would have just spent anyway. So it doesn't work the way that he's explaining it, for starters. But secondly, it just isn't cool. Yeah, sure, Donald Trump, when he said he was going to make Mexico pay for it, he was kind of full of shit. He was capping, but it was based. Like, it was funny because he was like, well, I'm going to make Mexico pay for it. Just complete emasculation, complete entitled, boss nigga attitude. Whereas with Ron DeSantis, he's just like, well, I'm going to impose a fee on all these poor people working in the Home Depot. Like, Jesus, really, bro? It's just weak beta sauce.
Cartels is sneaking fentanyl across the border when I'm president. That's going to be the last thing they do. We're going to shoot them stone cold dead.
Ambassador Haley. If the United States uses special forces in Mexico without prior notice to the Mexican allies to our south, what would your colleagues at the United Nations think about that?
I don't care what my colleagues at the United Nations think. What I'll tell you is, first of all,
So she doesn't give a scintilla of a shit over what anybody says, as long as it's like pro-death, pro-war. But as soon as like you want to like leave a country, you want to stop funding Ukraine, all of a sudden, we need to forget what are you going to forget our friends? Bruh.
Supply centers are and take them out. We'll put 25,000 more Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job. We will defund sanctuary cities. We will go back to the Remain in Mexico policy so that everybody stays in Mexico and they never get here in the first place. And instead of catch and deport, we'll go to catch and release. Instead of catch and release, we'll go to catch and deport. That is the way we'll deal with the border. I've
never seen a fuck up that big. She completely just reversed the phraseology going on there. Just an odd thing. I don't think people are going to really hold that against her, but just,
things that we have to do going forward. But I do agree with Chris. One of the first things that we have to do is really focus on mental health and addiction centers. It is something that is needed in our country terribly because we don't deal with mental health. And someone who doesn't get care for mental health falls into addiction, and we owe it to them to treat it like the cancer that it is.
Mr. Ramaswamy, special forces in Mexico, shoot them stone cold dead at the border?
One thing I just want to say in how we're talking about this issue is, like Ron, I've actually met many parents across this country who have lost their kids to laced pharmaceuticals that have fentanyl in them. The only thing I would ask Ron, I think you'd be on the same page with me on this. Let's not even call that an overdose. Right. That is not an overdose. That is poisoning. If you put that fentanyl in a Big Mac, we would not call that an overdose. You'd call it what it is. It's closer to bioterrorism. And I say that because as it uniquely relates to this crisis, that does warrant more aggressive means to deal with it. So there's a new presidential election in Mexico in 2024. People may not be aware of that. It's going to be someone other than overdose.
he just talks in a way that is not charismatic enough. So it's like, I just don't viscerally feel anything. I agree with what you're saying, but it's like, it's too try hard. And plus, he like says the fentanyl thing is bioterrorism, which is like the most retarded thing. The truth is, for the most part, is that fentanyl is used because it's cheaper and it's more logistically efficient to use it as a compound for drugs than is any other thing prior to. And so, of course, they're going to do that. Now, the dosing is really complicated, hence why when you have a bunch of fucking crackheads cutting up fentanyl, a lot of these things get laced and accidentally a lot of people die, obviously. But to think that it's bioterrorism is just completely ridiculous. Because if the Chinese really wanted to kill everybody, they would just increase the dosage of everything they sell, and then fucking like 10 million people would die overnight. Clearly, that's not the case at all.
Who has been a disaster in Mexico. I think he's even mentioned me obliquely in speeches to say that somebody who would do this shouldn't get anywhere near the White House. Well, AMLO, get out of the way. There's going to be someone else in charge. I hope to build a good relationship with that next president of Mexico. We'll use our own military to seal our own southern border. What we need to do is stop using our military to protect somebody else's border halfway around the world when we're short right here at home. Get serious about protecting this border. And then the other thing that hasn't been discussed is the northern border. I'm the only candidate on the stage, as far as I'm aware, who has actually visited the northern border. There was enough fentanyl that was captured just on the northern border last year to kill 3 million Americans. So we got to just skate to where the puck is going, not just where the puck is. Don't just build the wall, build both walls. Can't just complete the wall, use the military to seal the Swiss cheese for the tunnels that they're actually building underneath that wall.
Thank you, Mr. Ramaswamy.
Practical and actually get this job done.
Thank you. Kristen.
Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of forgettable parts, so I've been skipping over that, but we're going to get to the keystone part, and it's going to be the final little speech there by Ron DeSantis. Let's play that right now.
Governor DeSantis, you're closing. You have 1 minute.
We must reverse our country's decline, and that is going to require leadership. I will take the hits, I will take the arrows, I will take the barbs, because it's not about me, it's about you. It's not about the past, it's about your future. We are going to fight for you. I am going to win for you and your family, and I'm going to lead this country's revival. As a veteran of the Iraq War and in the Navy, I will always put service above self as president. As the father of 3 young
It's like the most robotic thing ever, man.
kids, I'm going to ensure that this country is left to the next generation in better shape than we found it. And as the governor of Florida, I delivered on all my promises, and you can trust me to deliver for you as the president of the United States. I am asking for your vote. I'll be a nominee that will be able to win the election. I will be a leader you can be proud of, and as your president, I will not let you down. God bless you.
Governor DeSantis, thank you.
The fakest smile possible, man.
I will
Holy
not let
shit.
you down. God bless you.
Governor DeSantis, thank you.
Bruh. That is tough. Okay. So, I mean, you got enough here. This is like my 3rd time watching the debate. I didn't plan it to be this way, but I mean, it's just like so bad to watch. Jesus Christ. So, in summation, who won the debate? I would say, honestly, Vivek won. He had a great moment at the beginning, and that kind of made up for any sort of folly he had going forward. And I think Nikki got the 2nd place, and then whoever else, who gives a fuck? I was talking to a guy after, in person, because there was a watch party, and he was like, oh, DeSantis won because he didn't talk that much. And it's like, bro, really? That's the best the DeSantis bros got, is that, well, he didn't fuck it up today. Like, hey, you need to actually make up ground. You're losing ground to Nikki Haley. You have to actually perform, not just guard and not make a mistake. So, Ron DeSantis just comes off super fake. It just doesn't work for anybody, and it's somewhat sad to see. And with Nikki, again, fake politician, but she's more competent than Ron. Vivek, competent, fulfills every grade in the book. It's just that he doesn't have any sort of performative nature, and it bites him in the ass constantly. And he talks too much. He's too verbose. Tim Scott, just forgettable. Who cares? He's going to be gone next debate anyhow. Chris Christie, fat. Okay. That's your analysis right there. I'm recording this at 3:30 in the morning, but you know what? High energy enough, no? Bye-bye.